Hello everybody, it's Paul Ducklin from Naked Security, back live on Facebook. Today's topic, as you can see, is what can we learn from the Twitter hack? I probably don't have to tell you which Twitter hack I mean. You've probably seen it in the news. By the way, this week I hope you can hear me. Last week I made a boo-boo and I forgot to turn the microphone on. So if anybody can't hear me, please send a comment. I mean that the other way around, don't I? I assume that if you can hear me, just say you can hear me so I know to plough ahead. But I'm sure you know what Twitter hack. Let's start at the beginning and then quickly get to the tips, because today you'll see I've got two cards. I've got a green card, a green and a red card. One for tips for what businesses can do, organizations can do to stop their internal support staff falling for the kind of problem that Twitter did. Having a quick look. I can hear you, Helga. Hello, Helga. Thanks for joining and thanks for letting me know. Like I said last week, I made a terrible mistake and I went for a couple of minutes without actually realizing that I forgot to turn the microphone on, and it's very hard to realize that that happened. So we're talking about the Twitter hack. As you probably saw, a small but significant number of high-profile accounts got hacked in the last couple of days, taken over to do a small burst of tweeting that was basically a cryptocurrency scam. Hey, I'm feeling generous today because I'm a very rich person. I'm a huge celebrity like an Elon Musk or a Joe Biden or someone like that. I'm giving back to the community. Send me $1,000 in Bitcoins and guess what? I'll send you $2,000 back. It sounds pretty unlikely, doesn't it? A, that someone like Elon Musk or Joe Biden would say that at all. And secondly, that if they really had money to give you $1,000 to give you, that they would not just give you the money, instead of making you give $1,000 and then giving you your money back, plus transaction fees for them, with another $1,000. So obviously it looks like a scam with hindsight, but it seems unfortunately that some people, possibly to the tune of $100,000, so that's 100 people around the world, may well have fallen for this. Although the crooks could have just been pushing currency through those Bitcoin accounts to give themselves an air of legitimacy. Maria, hello from Rio. Welcome back, Maria. Boa tarde. Tom, sound is on. Excellent. Great. So with two confirmations of the sound, I'm going to plough ahead anyway. So the big deal is that when you look at this Twitter hack, it's huge news because of the people involved. Like I said, Elon Musk, Joe Biden, a load of rappers, Barack Obama, I believe, Apple Computer, if you don't mind, and a small but significant list of cryptocurrency companies, exactly the kind of people that might be pumping up cryptocurrency offers and trying to get you to come and participate. In fact, this was a comparatively small hack in numerical terms. My understanding that Twitter's now desperately trying to find out what happened. They've said, well, it wasn't a hack that somebody actually broke our system so they could just go in and tweet from anybody. They basically did have to email or call up and blag their way into these accounts. And it looks like about 130 high-profile, max follower verified accounts were targeted by the crooks. And as far as I can see, the list so far is about 20 or so business people, big follower rapper people in the rapper community, and as well as politicians, like I mentioned, and 10 or so cryptocurrency companies, plus amazingly Apple as well. Now, it's no disrespect to Apple, it wasn't their fault. But there weren't many accounts hacked. The point is, the crooks didn't need to do this automatically. It seems that a small group of people could take their time calling up, persuading somebody inside Twitter, possibly a different person every time. So maybe they got through to 10 different support staff. Maybe they succeeded with 3 of them, and maybe they did a few accounts each. And as far as we can see, they didn't persuade those people to go rogue and start tweeting for them. Basically, they persuaded those people to add some email address to that account so the crooks could take it over and begin tweeting from it. So fortunately, it doesn't look as though the crooks needed or wanted to get inside and dig out personal information, though Twitter is now faced with a very difficult problem of finding out whether that did or did not happen. Twitter is also faced with a difficult problem of saying, yes, it was at most 130 accounts, and at most, say, 30 or 40 of those, I made that number up, we don't know yet, were actually taken over by the crooks. But the point is, it gave the crooks a small but very vigorous vehicle to promote their scams. Because you can imagine if you get an email from somebody who says, "Yours sincerely, Elon Musk," you go, "Oh, that's very likely indeed," because anybody can put anything in an email. But when you get a tweet or any social media message from an account of somebody, whether it's a high profile user or just a friend of yours, you're much more inclined to believe it because you feel that there's some traceability in it. So although these were high profile accounts and that makes it seem worse, it would still be egg on Twitter's face if 30 accounts like yours and mine had been hacked, even though we don't have, well, maybe some of you do. I have 10,000 or so followers, not 10 million followers. But even so, I'd be pretty aggrieved if someone had phoned up Twitter and managed to convince them that they were me and that they could take over my account and start tweeting nonsense. So the problem for my tip cards today is, what on earth can you do about something like this where it isn't your fault? You couldn't have chosen a stronger password, or maybe you could have, but the crooks didn't need your password. They didn't need your phone to get the two-factor authentication code or the SMS with the magic digits in it. They didn't need to know where you lived or anything. Basically, they were able to sweet talk people inside Twitter into going ahead and making significant changes to account settings that allowed them to steam in quickly and perpetrate their scam, saying, "Hey, send us money, we'll send you more money back." A likely story, but like I said, it seems to have worked. So you can't do much about that because the fault is actually operationally inside Twitter, that somebody on the support team was just too helpful. And it's hard to complain about that because most of the time you hear people say, "Oh, support were rubbish. They wouldn't look after me at all." In this case, it seemed that these callers with the gift of the gab were looked after far too well. So let's start by looking at what you can do about it as an individual. As a Twitter account holder now, I'm going to assume that you've got two-factor authentication turned on. I'm going to assume you've got a decent password. I'm going to assume you watch out what's being tweeted from your account or posted on your other social media accounts, just so you can see if something goes wrong and you've got some idea of what to do and where to report it if something does go wrong. But what can you do if you're faced with a scam like this where somebody else's account got hacked that you're inclined to trust and you suddenly get a message that you shouldn't have? Well, let's go through it. 3 obvious things. We've mentioned these before, but they are important. The first is, if it sounds too good to be true, it is too good to be true. Not that it probably is too good to be true. Just assume that if you get an offer that you just can't believe, if you're inclined to think it might be a scam and you don't know if you should believe it, guess what? You've already answered your own question. It's a scam. Delete, move on. Whether it comes from Elon Musk, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Apple Computer, or even from a cryptocurrency company that you may already have done business with. If it just sounds like nonsense, "Hey, send me money and I'll send it back with more," rather than the person saying, "I just want to give you $100, here it is." If you get something like that, if it sounds too good to be true, delete and move on. Simple as that. The second thing to remember, and this is specific to this scam because the crooks chose it for this very reason, is that remember that cryptocurrency transactions, if you've not done them before or you don't do them often, there are no regulatory or legal protections like you get with a regular bank account or a traditional payment card. There's no central authority. If you send a cryptocurrency transaction to somebody's Bitcoin wallet, it is like handing them cash in an envelope and walking away. If you give your cryptocurrency to a crook, you will never see it again. You may read stories about occasions where people did get them back because the cops got the person in time and they had access to send the Bitcoins back to people. It's so very rare that you should assume that's not going to happen. So don't forget that cryptocurrency, because of its unregulated nature, that gives it some strengths, but also when things go wrong, it means you are truly on your own. So be very careful before you send anybody anything. It's not like paying a credit card and then phoning up the credit card company and saying, "Whoa, I think I've been defrauded." With cryptocurrency, too late. And the last thing I want to remind you about, because this seems to have been something that could have saved a lot of people in the case of some of these fake tweets that were sent, is if the crooks make any sort of operational blunder at all, Like if they make a spelling mistake, if they put the date in the wrong format for your country, if they lay out the telephone number incorrectly because they don't realise you put numbers as, your numbers have a 0 at the beginning, or you normally write them in the following pattern, or if they write $50 as $50, but in your country you put the $, the currency sign in front like many countries do, they've made a mistake. They've given away that they are almost certainly not legitimate. So whatever you do, do not let the crooks get away with making a slip up. They don't always do it, so you can't rely on this. But as I've said before on these videos, the only thing worse than being scammed is being scammed and then realizing that the warning signs were there all along. And if you'd just taken 30 seconds longer and put your finger on something that didn't look right, you could have saved yourself. Helga says, lots of buffering and stuttering. Oh, sorry about that. I don't know whether that is your end or my end. It looks okay here, so I think it might be your end. I'm hoping so. By the way, for those watching, if you can hear this bit and you are suffering buffering, we do upload these videos recorded onto the phone itself onto YouTube later, and generally the quality there is a lot better because it's never been through the streaming system. So if there was buffering during the recording, it's usually eliminated during what we end up uploading to YouTube. But of course you have to go back and watch that later. Okay, so that's the green card. Now I'm on to my red card, and these are my 3 tips quickly to finish off for businesses. What can you do so that if you're in Twitter's position and you have a support team, you have people who are supposed to answer emails and take calls and make your customers feel satisfied, feel supported and feel happy, make sure that those people don't by accident go that little bit too far. Also make sure that if somebody in a completely different department to support gets fished in some way that could actually be the indicator that crooks have got bigger plans afoot, how can you find that out in advance? In other words, how can you get everybody to help you, not just relying on a small number of people in the security team? So my tip number 1 is never ever give up on user awareness. It has become terribly trendy these days to go, you know what, users will never learn, technology is the answer, forget users, they'll always make mistakes, they'll never remember passwords, they can't learn to use password managers, they don't like two-factor authentication, it's all too hard. What we need is some magic bullets, technological bullets that we can provide which will just sort all of this out. In my opinion, that's dead wrong, because technology only goes so far when you're dealing with a crook who is interacting with one of your staff, and that crook has what you might call the sociopathic gift of the gab. Because the job of support people, as I said before, is to be helpful, and there are people out there who are just skilled at saying just enough to get over the line, to get things done that really shouldn't happen. So if you concentrate on user awareness, if you show some respect for your users and you try to help them learn, my experience has been that most employees who are dealing with customers inside a company do actually want to do the right thing for cybersecurity reasons. They don't want the company to get ripped off, they don't want their jobs to be in danger, and they want to be good enough at cybersecurity so when they are at home, they don't get ripped off either. So most people want to do the right thing. Try to help them, and you may well find that instead of having a security team that's this big, you actually have an entire company that are the eyes and ears for that support team. Now that implies that if somebody sees something, they have some way to report it. So my second tip for companies is have a fast and easy way that staff can report anything that doesn't smell right from a cybersecurity point of view. Whether that's a special email address or an internal phone number that they can use if they're in the office by picking up the phone if you still have desk phones, or that they can use over the VoIP system without needing to go through a song and dance to get through. Because, like I mentioned before, the only thing worse than being scammed is being scammed and then realizing that the warning sign was there, but as a company you just never quite digested it. Remember this, the crooks generally, when they are doing phishing or social engineering attacks by email or by phone, they don't generally just try once. They'll try again. So their phishing emails might go to hundreds of people. They might call dozens of different people inside the company. In the Twitter case, it looks as though there were 150 accounts, 130 accounts were actively targeted, presumably by somebody calling up and mentioning them, but crooks didn't get hold of all of those accounts. So far, it looks like they only got 2 or 3 dozens worth. So, in other words, the telltale signs were there if the people that the crooks failed against had somewhere to report what was going on. So it is a question of, if you see something, say something, but that means you need to make it easy for people to report problems. Because if the first person to receive a phishing email or a scammy phone call actually calls it in and tells the security team, that can actually prevent all of the rest of the company from being harassed or tricked by that call in the future, because you've got early warning. And the last thing I would recommend is essentially two-factor authentication, but in a more personal form. In other words, two-step verifications required, 2 people involved, 2 different parts of the business, if you like, to authorize support changes which are very significant, such as account resets, password changes, adding emails to accounts that would allow somebody else to take them over. I'll tell a very quick story that recently at Sophos we had an online account that we needed to recover. I forget what had happened. I think somebody had left and we didn't have the password. And I won't mention the company, but I was very, very proud of them afterwards because we did it. We were able to get hold of that account back. It really was ours, but they did make us work for it. And they made us go through essentially 3 separate steps. First, we had to have the gift of the gab and the right answer. So we had to convince somebody in support that we had a case even to start with and we weren't just somebody calling up. Then there was a technological check where we were required to do something on our website, put in a secret code that they could check, that gave that company the confidence that the person who'd called up really was speaking on behalf of a company that had the authority to make changes on systems that they claimed. And the third thing they asked us to do is basically someone in our finance or a legal section needed to send some official documentation, put a name on it that they could check. And as far as I know, they got a lawyer at the other end to look at this. So what they did is it was sort of like 3-step verification. We had to go through 3 checks, but those 3 checks were carried out by independent people in separate parts of the business. So one person, even if we were scamming and they'd fallen for it, they wouldn't be able to convince the second person because it was a different sort of person doing a different sort of check, different sort of test in a different sort of way. So that makes a very big difference. It does mean that sometimes things that people are anxious to do quickly, like get their account recovered, may take longer. But it does mean that you might not end up in the position that Twitter did, where they're trying to explain why somebody, anybody apparently, could phone up and basically say, hello, I'm Joe Biden / Elon Musk / Kanye West / Apple Computer Inc. And by the way, I own this account, let me take control of it. That is a very embarrassing look for Twitter, and it's going to take some explaining. So don't let that happen to you. Remember, support should be efficient, it should be effective, it should be polite, but it doesn't have to be instantaneous if somebody is asking you to do something tricky. So thanks very much for listening, folks. Let me just see if there are any questions. No, just Helga talking about buffering. Folks, if you're listening to this later and you do have any questions, or better yet, some suggestions about ways that you have detected and stopped crooks from getting further than they thought they would be able to in your company, please let us know in the comments and we'll reply whether it's now or later. So thanks for listening, folks, and until next time, stay secure.